Earl sat at his desk at the center and listened to the chatter of the kids who had signed up for the affected program. These were a new round of kids who'd registered. There was still some kids from the last session who were committed to the cause like Melissa. They had a great time filming the infomercials that were being shown throughout the school district. Welcome back, my friends. I hope you are doing well. Thank you for coming back. I truly appreciate the support. This series is a labor of love and dedication. I promise that it is worth it. Please tell a friend to help this channel grow. Now let's get back to the story. Those kids felt like superstars with the notoriety they received. This school year, he hoped that the affected program would spread to other school districts. The program is working out better than I had thought. Those kids are absolutely brilliant, Earl commented. Paul, who was sitting across from him, nodded his approval too. It had been great fun doing the tapings, and he had personally seen the results. There had been young Melissa from the summer they had launched the program who had raised all kinds of flags. She had been quiet and withdrawn. It wasn't until they started having group sessions that her story came to light. She confessed that her parents were addicts. Earl and Paul both bent backwards to help her parents get straight. They had personally driven them to rehab programs and drug testing sites. Finally, all their hard work had paid off. Melissa's parents had come through with flying colors and were now volunteers as guest speakers on open nights. Have you given any thoughts to the conversation we had the other night? Earl asked his partner. I have. I thought it seemed strange for this guy to wait so long to contact Ezekiel. I can't see why he would stay loyal to him, especially since he was out of the picture for so long. Criminals are mercenary by nature. They tend to go for themselves, especially if there is profit to be made, Paul answered. He leaned forward in his chair. Why are you so interested in this ex-con? This particular ex-con is Lindora's father, and I am intrigued. What do you know about counterfeited money? Do we know any of recent perps knowledgeable in the art? Earl leaned forward too. No, and why are we talking about counterfeit money? If the money was bogus, it would have raised flags and been confiscated. This is money that has been sitting in a Swiss account for over 30 years gathering interest and dust. I think the problem is getting to it. I still think the money's origin is the place to start. If Luke Gilman had so much money, why would he associate with the type of people he did? People with money usually traveled in like social circles. I did a background check on his family, and both his parents were military, and even with their pensions combined, they didn't have that much. So, you're saying that Luke had gotten the money by some other means, and it would make sense for him to stash it abroad. And knowing you, my friend, this isn't news to you. Tell me what else you know, Paul said with a wide smile. Earl usually used him as a sounding board. I had some time to go over some of his deposit records, and don't ask how I got them. The fact that there wasn't a pattern revealed that there was one. It would seem that Luke was getting money regularly and was banking it at irregular intervals. With his social security number, I was able to track his employment records and found that one Luke Gilman worked at the Federal Reserve, Earl said. Paul grinned wider. Earl never disappointed him. There had to be a catch somewhere, though. This was too easy, and from what Earl recited, the facts about Luke's past told him that it was just the tip of the iceberg. Why did Kevin ask you to help him if he could have gotten this information on his own? Asked Paul. Earl shrugged. Kevin told me that this Smithy character wants the money, and somehow Lindora's father has the PIN number to access the account. The funny thing about it is that Zeke doesn't know he has it. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. We've got to figure out what that number is before Smithy makes a move on Zeke. Is that it? Earl nodded and glanced at his watch. It was almost time to head home. He could hear the kids cleaning up. They had pizza today, and there were several boxes to crush and bind for the trash. The partners stood up to go help. By 6:30, the place was shipshape, and the last of the teenagers were leaving. Paul made sure all the offices were locked and then punched in the security code. Earl met him in the parking lot, and they parted, each to their homes. Earl drove to his parents' house for a short visit, then home to Emma and their children. This was the best part of the day for him. The minute he entered their home, peace reigned. At home, he could relax, play with his children, and catch up with his wife. The world outside his door was no longer important. Noah was crawling in the living room when Earl entered the house and was overjoyed when his son spotted him and double-timed it to his feet. He sat down on his haunches and lifted his head to watch his father. Earl, unable to resist, stooped down to scoop him up, delighting Noah in the process. "Good afternoon, little man. How was your day?" Earl asked him. Noah's answer was a barrage of babbles and smiles. "And where is your gorgeous mom?" Again, Noah answered with babble. Earl continued to speak with his son as he walked further into his home. He found Emma in the kitchen. She had her back to him, stirring a pot on the stove, and she was also talking on the phone. From the sound of it, he was talking with her best friend Lindora. "I'll call you back, Lynn. Earl just came home." She clicked the phone off, placed it on the counter, and turned to face her husband. "I see you've caught Noah. We've been playing this game. He crawls away and I go get him and bring him back. He thinks it's great fun," Emma told her husband with a smile. She reached over to the counter and picked up an envelope next to her phone and handed it to him. Earl took it and found his sister's wedding invitation. He shook his head. He thought it was a waste to send him an invitation. His wife was the maid of honor, but his sister Doreen had insisted that they could save it as a memento. The wedding was in 1 week. His wife and sister had been working on the preparations for months. He dropped the card on the table and hoisted his son higher on his hips. "What's for dinner?" He thought he could smell chicken, but he couldn't be sure. "We're having baked chicken and some leftover stuffing your mother gave us from Thanksgiving. She gave me a whole pan full and another with turkey. I don't know about you, but I couldn't eat another piece of turkey if they paid me," Emma told him. "Good call. If it doesn't go bad before we meet Tuesday with the kids, I'll bring it for them." Then he did what he'd wanted to do the minute he entered the house. He clasped her arm and pulled her to him and kissed her. Noah blew raspberries between them, forcing them apart. Earl placed his son in the playpen and went up to shower. As he showered, he thought about whether he should tell Emma about his involvement with Kevin's investigation. He knew how she worried about Kevin's knowledge of his decommission and how she feared he might become tempted to join the American Bureau to work with Kevin. As a matter of fact, he was tempted. It was something he found that she had been right about. But he'd promised her, and he intended to keep that promise. That didn't mean he couldn't help out a friend, could it? Especially since this friend was dear to Emma. He thought that it might be okay. Earl dressed in a pair of jeans and a polo. He ran his hand through his hair, feeling for dampness. The thing about dreads was that when he bathed, he had to wear a shower cap to keep it dry. His hair had gotten longer and didn't fit in the cap anymore. He needed a trim, as his wife kept pointing out. He joined his family downstairs and found his stepdaughter, Sam, helping set the table. She smiled at him when she saw him. "Hi, Daddy Earl. How was your day?" "Good evening, Samantha." "My day was fine. How was yours?" Earl asked as he bent down to place a kiss on her head. Samantha giggled at the formality. It was a routine they'd developed. "Mine was fine, too. Mom said that we have to go for the wedding rehearsal dinner, and I get to wear my flower girl dress tomorrow. I'm so excited I can't stand it," she said, all in a rush. Emma chuckled from across the table. "Can you tell that this is her first time being a flower girl? You'd think she was in a fashion show the way she goes on." "You will be the prettiest flower girl there, and your mum will be proud to watch you walking down the aisle," Earl said. Noah screeched from the living room and Emma went to get him. She placed him in his high chair, and the family clasped hands for a prayer before they ate their dinner. Dinner talk was about the wedding and how everything was ready. Earl was beside himself with all the wedding talk. He truly understood, but he couldn't fathom why his sister, mother, and wife changed their minds about floral arrangements and color schemes. Jared, his brother-in-law-to-be, was just as baffled. However, he stoically endured all of it. As far as he was concerned, all he had to remember was to say, "I do," and his part was done. Jared had insisted on a regular black tuxedo, and he didn't care to match anyone. Doreen had insisted that the bridesmaids' dresses match the flowers in her bouquet, and the groomsmen's cummerbund matched their partner's dresses. He had learned to stop arguing and just go with the flow. He was proud that he had won their wedding date. He hadn't wanted to wait for summer to get married. He had insisted on the weekend right after Thanksgiving when the weather was still comfortable. Months prior, he'd moved back to his apartment. He was devastated. It was why he'd insisted on the date, and now the wait was almost over. After putting the kids to bed, Emma turned to her husband with that look she sometimes wore when she wanted answers. "Was there something you wanted to discuss, Detective?" He was no longer surprised that she could read him anymore. He nodded. "Yes, there is. I wanted you to be aware that Kevin asked me to help him with something. It isn't bureau stuff, but I wanted you to know. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What does Kevin want you to help him with? It has to do with Lindora's father. Dora asked Kevin to help him before she introduced them to each other. Earl began. Lynn doesn't have a father. We both grew up without one. Earl nodded. Lynn's father had been in prison for the last 30 years, and he had just recently been released. Dora never told Lynn because she thought he'd never be released. She was wrong and he wants to meet her, but there are some complications. He then told her everything he knew. He watched Emma think. He could tell that she was remembering their childhood. Lynn had a right to know who her father was, but Earl wasn't so sure if Lynn was ready to meet an ex-con for a father. This man was a stranger to her just as her own had been. The difference between the two women was that Emma's father hadn't known he had a daughter. Dora had been carrying Lynn when he went to prison. I don't have any problems with you helping Kevin with this stuff. I only ask that when Dora feels comfortable telling Lynn that I be there. She's going to be nuts with it, and her mother won't be able to help her deal. That's why I've come to you, love. I have every confidence that you'll be a great comfort to her when the time comes. Kevin had some reservations in asking me to help because I told him about how you felt. Emma looked at him with disbelief. Detective, sometimes I think you don't know me at all. Lynn and I are closer than sisters. I would do anything for her, and I know she would do the same for me. If you and Kevin can help, then I'm all for it. Kevin awoke to the sound of his son crying. He turned to check on his wife, but she wasn't there. Lynn must have heard him too. Slowly he got up and headed for Marcus's room. There he found his wife sitting on the rocker with his son in her arms. Good morning, sleepyhead, she said. Good morning, baby. Are you feeling better? Lynn nodded. Much better. I think I just needed to rest. Aren't you going to the office today? She looked at the clock on the far wall of the nursery. Kevin nodded. I am, but I wanted to make sure that you were okay. I don't have to be in until 11. I have time. It was just after 9 in the morning. Kevin left Lynn to care for their son while he headed downstairs to start breakfast. The telephone rang just as he reached the kitchen. It was Dora. Hi, Mom. Lynn is better this morning. She's feeding Marcus a bottle upstairs. How are you this fine morning? Kevin asked. He listened for a few minutes and arranged to visit her after work. Lynn joined him and placed Marcus into the high chair. She opened the refrigerator to pull out ingredients for breakfast. Kevin didn't argue because he sucked at making breakfast. Before marrying her, he'd make do with a protein shake. Babe, who was that calling so early? Lynn asked casually. That was your mother. She wanted to know how you were feeling. I told her that you just needed to rest. Why don't you give her a call later? Kevin suggested. Okay, is today going to be a late day? No, but if something comes up, I promise to give you a heads up. Kevin answered easily and got up to clear the table. Lynn watched as he walked away, heading for the bath upstairs. Marcus soon claimed her attention, and she dropped her line of thinking. As soon as Kevin said that he would call if something came up, alarms sounded in her head. If he said that, it meant that something was already up. Okay, let's stop right there. You, the audience, already know what's going on, but do you think Lindora should know about her father? From her husband or her mother? Comment what you think. Now let's get back to the story. Kevin kissed her at the door, and as soon as his car pulled out of the drive, Lynn picked up the phone to call Emma. She needed someone to talk with about her concerns. Kevin had been doing a lot of extra work in their home office lately, and he'd also started locking his computer when he wasn't home. That in itself wasn't suspicious, but turning it off or angling the monitor away so she couldn't see the screen was very suspicious indeed. Emma answered the phone and told her that she'd be over for late lunch. Lynn clicked off and dialed her mother's number. They chatted for a few minutes, and Lynn was satisfied that her mother was well. She still had the feeling that something was going on with her, but she wasn't going to dwell on it too much. It was her husband's new secretive ways that was bothering her now. While her son napped, Lynn did a little light housekeeping and then took a shower. She hurried to get dressed before Emma arrived. Lunch was nearly ready when Emma rang the doorbell. She came alone. So what's for lunch? I only had coffee this morning, and I feel like I could eat a whole cow. You're fresh out of luck. I ran out of cow yesterday, but if you can stand fish, I can deliver. Lynn replied. Fish is good, Emma agreed and headed for the kitchen. She went to the oven and spied the Phyllis in the broiler. Where's Marcus? He's still napping. Why don't you sit while I get our lunch on the table? Emma shook her head and put her hand up. No. Why don't you sit and I'll get our lunch? You look tired, Emma said. She plated their food and sat across from her friend. Gee, if I knew you were going to baby me, I would have asked you to come earlier. I straightened up the bedrooms upstairs and bathrooms. I could have used you then. I don't know about all of that, but I would have helped you a little. How are your feet? Still swollen? Emma asked as she sank her teeth into her filly. This is good. When did you have time to dress fish? Please, I pulled it out of the freezer already prepared. I don't have time to do things from scratch. I asked you over for a reason. I wanted to know if you could tell when Earl was on a case and didn't want you to know. Emma took her time in answering, chewing slowly. She took a sip of her drink to stall even further. Her friend was getting vibes from her husband and didn't know if she should tell her what she knew. I don't think I knew. It was more like he was preoccupied. Is Kevin acting weird? Weird is probably not the right word. He is more attentive lately, like he feels that I'm fragile or something. This morning he said that he would call me if something came up, and I got the impression that something already had. I don't know if it's my imagination, but things don't feel right. Does Kevin talk to you about his cases? I mean, I know that you haven't known about his job for very long, but does he tell you about his cases? Emma asked. No, he doesn't. But he is in the office a lot lately, and when I go in there, he turns the screen away. He's never done that before. Usually it would be where I get to sit in his lap and distract him. Now he either averts the screen or turns it off altogether, Lynn replied. Emma felt like she was in the middle again, just like when Kevin asked her to keep his profession a secret. This time, however, she felt that it was better to keep her in the dark, at least until the conditions were right. Why don't you just ask him? If it's something he can't talk about, he'll tell you that he can't. And if it's something he can, he'll tell you. Do you get the feeling that it's something dangerous? Emma asked, hoping that it wasn't. No, it's just that he's suddenly so focused on me. I don't mind the attention, but it feels like he's distracting me or protecting me from something. Does that make sense? I don't know what to tell you. I still think that you should just ask him outright. Emma stood to clear the table, and she even washed the dishes. If you talk with him later, give me a call. I have to go deal with Doreen. She's having another crisis. Isn't the wedding this weekend? You'd think that we started planning this wedding this week instead of all summer. Honestly, I can't wait for the whole thing to be over. I didn't think Doreen was this fussy, but boy was I wrong. She is driving me crazy. You had the invitations out, the bridesmaid dresses sorted, the flowers in the hall booked. What else is there to do? Lynn asked, counting on her fingers. It's not that stuff. Doreen went on this ridiculous diet and she's lost 20 pounds. The girl was fine to begin with, but she wanted to fit into this size 6 dress and was determined to fit it. The bridal store had the same dress in her normal size, which is 10 by the way, and Doreen was not having it. Somehow she'd gotten it into her head that she's fat. If she's fat, then I'm a hippo. I would kill to be my regular size 8 right about now. Girl, you need to knock some sense into that child. She's going to wind up walking up the aisle, see her man, and fall in a dead faint at his feet, Lynn warned. I don't know what else to do. Her mother's worried too. My plan is to have a couple of protein shakes on hand. We plan to force them down her throat, and if I can't, I know Earl will be glad to. Emma left after making her friend promise to put her feet up. Smithy watched the pretty young woman walk out of the house, get into her car, and drive off. He knew that wasn't Iron Hand's daughter. He'd been keeping tabs on Dora over the years as well, and he knew all about Lindora Brooks. She looks like she'd done well for herself. The neighborhood wasn't half bad, and her husband dressed in business attire for work every morning. It appeared that he made a good living to support his family. He wasn't a violent man, Smithy thought to himself, but he was at the end of his rope. He'd been patient all these years, and now the waiting was over. Iron Hand's daughter was going to be his plan B if her father won't give him what he wanted. He clutched the brand new wallet he'd brought the other day in his hand, hoping that this simple gift was going to help him get the information that he needed. Iron Hand hadn't let on that he knew about his daughter, so Smitty wasn't going to either. Lindora was his last resort to force Iron Hand to comply. He bought the wallet in the hopes of getting Iron Hand to empty out his old wallet for the new one. He also hoped that he could get a glimpse of his license. Smithy had a photogenic memory, and all he needed was a quick peek. Smithy started his car and drove off, confident that this ploy would get him the PIN number for his money, not once noticing the Blacktown car that pulled out behind him. Earl tapped his fingers on the steering wheel as he followed Smithy. "Now what do you suppose good old Smithy was doing parked across the street from your house, Kevin?" Earl asked his friend. "I don't know, but I get the feeling that he's known about Lynn all along. Do you suppose that he has intentions using my wife to sway Zeke?" Kevin had this cold look on his face that Earl had never seen before. He supposed that there was a lot about Kevin he didn't know, especially on a professional level. They followed Smithy to the computer store Zeke worked at. The store was in the shopping mall on Queens Boulevard. They parked and followed at a distance and watched as Smithy entered the store. They couldn't tell what was being said, but they witnessed him hand Zeke a package. Kevin was shocked to see the blatant display until they saw Zeke open the package to reveal what looked like a wallet. Earl immediately realized what was happening. He's trying to get at Zeke's old wallet. What could possibly be in that old wallet Smithy wants so badly? Asked Earl. "I'm thinking that maybe the information for the account wasn't complete. He needs another shot at it." Kevin answered easily. "We need to get in there." "Not so fast, my friend. If he knows about Lynn, he knows about you. Why don't I go in there and check things out?" Earl suggested. Kevin watched Earl enter the store. He had not let on that he had gotten nervous when they followed Smithy from his home to his house. What did Smithy have in mind for his family? Which of his family members did Smithy single out for terror? Was Dora in danger, or was it Lynn? Are you beginning to feel nervous now? Smithy had something planned, and this story is going in a direction worthy of attention. Let's continue, shall we? Kevin shook his head and tried to focus on Earl approaching Zeke and Smithy. He wished he could be in there, but Earl was right. If Smithy knew about Lynn, it was a safe bet that he knew about him too. He watched Earl walk boldly into the store and make a beeline for Zeke. From his vantage point, he could see Smithy's cajoling gestures at Zeke. He must be trying to get Zeke into taking the wallet. Apparently, Zeke wasn't cooperating. "Excuse me," Earl said, interrupting them. "I was wondering if you could help me after you're done with this gentleman." Smithy looked around as if he couldn't believe that there weren't any other sales personnel around. The store was unusually busy. All the associates were busy. He snatched the wallet from Zeke's hand and told him gruffly that he would talk with him later. Zeke watched him storm away and shook his head. Then he turned to the gentleman who had given him his reprieve. "What can I do for you, sir?" Zeke asked with a smile. "Actually, I don't need anything. I just wanted to get Smithy away from you." Earl began and put out his hand. "My name is Earl Solano. My wife's best friend is Dora's daughter. Her husband is with the CIA, and we are here to help you." Zeke looked around quickly and then shook Earl's hand. "Am I in some sort of trouble?" he asked nervously. "No, we'd like to talk with you. When is your lunch break?" 15 minutes later, the trio were sitting at the food court. Zeke sat across Kevin and Earl and wondered if this wasn't a setup of some kind. Why would these men want to help him? An ex-con. He studied Kevin and recognized him from the pictures Dora showed him. "Ezekiel Dade, I'm Kevin Brooks, Lindora's husband. It is good to meet you, sir. My partner and I are worried about your situation, and we'd like to talk with you. I know this must feel awkward for you, but please understand that we're here to help. We've surmised that Smithy is after you for your wallet. We can't figure out what he wants from it, but maybe you can give us a clue," Earl added. "Do either of you have identification? How am I supposed to believe that you are who you say you are?" Zeke asked, stalling. He was scared. Both men flashed him their badges. Well, that did it for him. The badges were real. "Mr. Dade, before we go any further, I need to know if you trust us. If you don't, then we won't be of any help. If you do, I will personally introduce you to my wife," Kevin said. "It isn't that I don't trust you fellows. It's that I was wondering if you trust me. I am a recently released convict for a federal offense." "Why would you help me?" asked Zeke. "That's a good question. I can't speak for my friend, but I, for one, am all for the underdog. From what Dora told me about your past, you were just a man caught up in something you had no control over. I believe that you deserve a second chance," Kevin said. Zeke told them everything he knew. He told them that he thought Smithy wanted something from him, but he didn't know what it was. Earl told him that Smithy was after the PIN to withdraw money from the Swiss account, that the PIN might be his license number. Zeke pulled out his old wallet and showed them his license. It was old and fading. Earl took note of the numbers, and so did Kevin. Then they advised him to stay alert and to stay away from Smithy if he could. Smithy came rushing in at closing time. He looked anxious and fidgety. Zeke calmly went on with his closing routine while Smithy waited on him. Then he turned to face the man. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. "I came back to apologize for trying to force the wallet on you earlier. It was just a gesture of goodwill, nothing more. Why don't you take it and I won't bother you again? I can tell when someone isn't interested in friendship." Smithy put on his best old man face and made to leave. "It isn't that I don't want to be friends, Smithy. I have to be careful, you know. I'm on parole, and I don't want anything to jeopardize it. If the police or my parole officer knew I was associating with people from my past, I might get in trouble. I might get picked up again just for being around the club. So you see, it isn't you. I have to protect my freedom," Zeke explained. He figured that if he put his cards on the table, Smithy might come clean. He pushed the wallet back gently. Smithy took it and nodded. "Sure thing, Iron Hand. I mean, Zeke. Well, I guess this is it. I'll see you around then." He walked away, leaving Zeke standing there. Zeke watched his retreating back, and as mall security hustled him further. He waited a good 15 minutes before he left the mall. Something about the way Smithy acted bothered him. As he walked to the exit, Zeke tried to remember Smithy from the old days. Smithy was a young man with an ego the size of Brooklyn then. He remembered that overconfident air about him. He wasn't bad looking and was a snazzy dresser too. The women members dated him on and off. As Zeke walked, he thought about how Smithy used to talk about his uncle. Some of the things he used to say made it seem that his uncle was well connected. Yeah, Smithy used to threaten anyone who gave him lip. He used to say, "You don't want me to give my Uncle Vic a call. He might not like the way you talk to me." Most of the time, whoever he was talking to would back off, and he used to throw money around like he had plenty of it. He had this friend who used to come by the club to hang out also, and Smithy called him Cap. He sported the same crew cut as Smithy. You could tell that he was military because of the way he carried himself. Zeke thought that he kept Smithy in check. Zeke got on the bus and sat still thinking about the situation with Smithy. Thinking back on all the stuff that had been going on in the bike club, Zeke realized that his place was being used as a cover for the real things that were going on. He felt foolish now thinking about it. Those guys probably thought he was this big ignorant dope they could all walk over. And they did. For instance, when the guys had started committing crimes, he wasn't in on it and had looked the other way until the cops came looking. Then he had tried to put his foot down. For a while things quieted down, but not for long. Then the guys voted to get the jackets with his handle embroidered on it. The police knew where to come when one of them did something. He'd been responsible. Zeke had been questioned more times than he could remember about the stuff his members done. Smitty had managed to stay out of trouble too, and maybe the reason for that was because he had bigger fish to fry, as they say. Zeke got off the bus and began walking the 3 blocks to his apartment. Not once did he notice the car following him from the bus stop. When Zeke entered his building, the car sped off. Smitty was furious. He hadn't been this angry in a long time. Not since that fool Cap had insinuated that he should share his money with him. Why couldn't Iron Hand cooperate like the good old boy that he was? Now he was forced to do what he hadn't really wanted to do, and it was entirely that Black Hick's fault. Smithy drove around until he could calm down and then headed home. He had things to do, and he needed to prepare. Smitty listened carefully to the instructions he was being given. It was always the same disembodied voice over the telephone, telling him what he should do. Smitty knew that they were going to be upset with him. He hadn't come through with his plan of getting Zeke to flash his license. The voice told him that it was very important that he got the numbers to the account, and as always they stressed that they weren't interested in the money. The money was his to keep. All they wanted was the numbers. Smithy hung up and felt bile rising up from his stomach. He didn't know who these people were, but he knew that they meant business. They had gotten angry with him after he had killed Cap, but helped him dispose of the body. This was his chance to finally get his, and Zeke was in the way. He planned to pack up and head to a tropical island somewhere and leave all of the crap behind. Emma tossed and turned until she awoke. She was breathing heavily and couldn't catch her breath. Her heart was racing and beating so fast she placed a hand over it in an effort to settle it. "Are you all right, love?" Earl asked. He had awakened due to her thrashing about in her sleep. He turned on the lamp and sat up, watching her with concern. She'd been dreaming. "I think so. I was dreaming. I can't quite remember what it was about except that I was running," she replied. "Were you in some sort of danger?" Earl asked, remembering the months of nightmares she'd had a little over a year ago. Emma sat up too. "I don't think I was in danger. I think I was running with someone. Only I can't remember who. I was running so fast I couldn't catch my breath." Earl reached over and pulled her close. "Does the dream feel like before?" "Not really. I just have an anxious feeling." She lay her head on his shoulder, drawing comfort from the contact. Together they lay back down and Emma closed her eyes to sleep. Earl took comfort in that, and he too tried to go back to sleep. The dreams from a year ago were menacing and dark. She had dreamed for a solid 2 months. Perhaps this time is because she is stressed about his sister's wedding. When he looked down, Emma was sleeping. He closed his eyes and fell asleep, thinking that if anything was going to happen, that he'd be more aware. Kevin got into his car and drove off when everything in his being screamed for him to stay home. Earl assured him that he had someone watching the house and watching over his family. Lynn had gone into work, and Dora had come to care for his son. He didn't see anyone, but that didn't mean there wasn't someone. He drove to the converted church to meet with Earl and Paul. Paul met him at the door and led him to the office he shared with Earl. Earl was sitting at the desk, looking intently at his computer screen. "Good morning, Kevin," he said, looking away from the screen. "I have something really interesting for you. Pull up a chair." Kevin quickly walked around the desk and sat down beside Earl. On the screen were bank records, which he surmised were of the Swiss account. He scanned to the bottom to see the final balance and whistled. He realized that Earl had figured out the PIN and gained access to the account. No wonder Smithy is willing to do anything to get at this. $15 million is a lot of money. The question is, where did they get it from, and how did you get the PIN? Kevin asked. Earl pushed away from the desk and stood up. He explained that he got a glimpse of Zeke's motorcycle license and used it. He said that it was just a matter of thinking in a straight line. Luke and Smitty had both worked at the Federal Reserve. Their job was to shred imperfect bills. They must have found a way to take some of that money. If they found a way to take some of that money, wouldn't there be a shortage log and an investigation? Paul asked. Yes and no. The shortage wouldn't have been apparent then. You see, the bills they took were imperfect, and the Federal Reserve wouldn't be alerted until the bank started picking them up. It could be months before any of it shows up at the bank. The imperfect money gets shredded, and then the bulk gets weighed. They couldn't take too much because they'd get caught. I watched a documentary on the process. I figured they found a way to take the money and fool the scale, Earl explained. Okay, suppose that Smithy and Luke had found a way to take a few bills from the reserve. They couldn't just walk into the bank and deposit it, could they? Paul asked, confused. Any neighborhood store would not know the bills were imperfect. They are trained to look for the usual marks. The bills had the marks, so they wouldn't know. The money circulates around the neighborhood until it gets to the bank and then flagged. Kevin added, finally understanding everything. He shifted in his seat, shaking his head. Earl was brilliant, and he was glad he talked with him and asked his help. He'd guessed some of the answers, but not to the extent Earl had done. So if Smithy and Luke succeeded against all odds of not getting caught taking the money, why is there only one account in the Swiss bank? Were they going to share it? Somehow, I don't think Smithy is the sharing type. Paul and Earl shook their heads in agreement. One or the other was going to stab the other in the back for it, Paul deduced. Earl punched a few more keys and pulled up Smithy's military record. His real name is Anthony Segatori. He is 65 and was honorably discharged from the Army because of an injury in Afghanistan. He even received a Purple Heart for bravery, Earl read. Anthony was something of a wizard when it came to fashioning keys from pieces of metal. He'd been sent to the brig for using one of those keys to open locked doors on base. So he was clever. Probably why he figured a way to siphon off money from the reserve, Kevin said. It would appear so. There is something in the records that got me thinking about a cold case. His partner in crime on base was one Joseph Capelli. He was found in the Hudson with stab wounds 29 years ago. I backtracked to find that he was the one who accompanied Zeke to question Dora. I showed Dora a picture of Capelli, and she recognized him, Earl said. What? Paul and Kevin said. I figured that Smitty used his pal to impersonate an FBI agent in order to gain Dora's trust. Then perhaps Capelli wanted in on the money, and Smitty didn't want to share. It's speculation at this point, but it fits. Anthony Segatori killed his friend, Earl said. How do you think this is going to play out? Kevin asked his friends. He was thinking about Dora all alone at his house caring for his son. I don't think he's going to kill again. I believe that he's going to find a way to use Dora to force Zeke's hand, Earl replied. For the next hour, they strategized until they thought they had every contingency covered. Then they called Zeke and told him what Smitty was after. Kevin called Dora to check on her and his son. They were both fine. Paul was able to put a man who was on disability on Smithy. Every move he made was documented. If he got into his car and drove within a 4-block radius of Dora, he would be picked up. Because they weren't on an official case, they couldn't get more help. The men they got were all volunteers who had free time. Paul's man-tailing Smithy was on sick leave with a dislocated shoulder, but he could follow Smitty in his car. Kevin and Earl agreed that they wouldn't disrupt Dora's routine if they didn't have to, simply because Lindora and Emma would pick up on it. Earl especially didn't want Emma worried because she was dreaming. He felt that somehow she had picked up on it. Kevin went home early so he could be there when his wife came home. Earl went home to find his sister sitting on the couch having a panic attack. Her wedding was in 24 hours. His mother was there also. Immediately, he asked for Emma. I'm here, Earl. Don't panic. Doreen is having a meltdown, and we're trying to talk some sense into her. Doreen looked awful. The diet she'd been on had left her a shell of herself. He took her by the arm and led her to his home office. He told the others to wait. I can't help it, Earl. Jared doesn't want me anymore, and he said that our marriage was going to change everything. I can't marry him. I just can't, Doreen said tearfully. Earl took her hand and squeezed it. Doreen, that man loves you more than you know. When a man marries, he takes on the responsibility of everything. Her life, her safety, her peace and joy. That's a lot to take on. But I know he wants it, and he wants it with you. Stop scaring yourself. Tomorrow you're going to walk down that aisle and say yes to everything he is and you are. Doreen cried and nodded. They left the office and joined the others. Doreen told her mother that she was okay and ready to marry Jared. Emma ushered her sister-in-law and mother out the door and turned to face her husband. I'm not even going to ask what you said to her. I'm just grateful. She was driving me crazy. Emma dreamed again that night. Earl opened his eyes immediately. She was whimpering, and he had to shake her awake when she screamed a blood-curdling scream. Emma was shaking and her breathing was labored. I was dreaming about the wedding. Everything was going fine until we arrived at the reception hall. Doreen was dancing with Jared, and then all of the sudden Lindora started screaming and holding her belly. She was screaming in pain. Everybody crowded around her, and she was bloody. Then I grabbed her hand and we started running. I think I was trying to get her help, Emma relayed tearfully. Did you see anyone trying to hurt her? Asked Earl. No. In the dream, Lynn had suffered a miscarriage. I've been stressing over the wedding preparations, and then there's the stuff about Lynn's father. I don't think there's anything to worry about, Emma said. She looked at the clock on the bedside table and told her husband to go back to sleep, that they had a busy day coming. The following morning was Saturday. It was wedding day. Emma was like a general ordering her troops. She pulled out a giant bag full of clothing and shoes. She had Earl fill the car with all the things she needed to make the day successful. Earl did everything without complaint. When Emma climbed into the driver's seat in the SUV, she warned him not to forget to wear the shoes and socks she picked out for him. Earl nodded and watched her drive off. Then he moved, grabbing the shoes and socks. Earl left the house and headed to Kevin's. Between Kevin, Paul, and him, they planned to be vigilant. Earl relayed Emma's dream, and they looked at each other understanding. If anything was going to happen, it would occur at the reception. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Doreen looked lovely in spite of her recent diet crisis. Emma was a vision in her gown as well. She hadn't allowed him to see her before the wedding, and now he was properly impressed. Earl was ever vigilant as the procession made their way out of the church to the reception hall. The weather had cooperated, and Doreen only needed a heavy sweater across her shoulders to be comfortable. Emma had Sam wear a light jacket over her adorable flower girl dress. Kevin caught Earl's eyes and they nodded to each other. Paul caught Earl's attention and winked. It seemed that everyone was in place. Dora and Lindora were flanked by her husband and Paul as they made their way to the car. Earl had to ride the limo along with the wedding party, so he was able to keep an eye on Emma. The ride to the hall took 20 minutes, then another 20 before the wedding party could enter. The photographer had taken several pictures before allowing them to continue with the procession. Earl had come to appreciate Emma's aversion to parties and crowds, but she was holding her own. There were close to 150 guests who were taking turns in congratulating the couple. Dora and Lindora were already seated at a table, and Kevin was sitting between them. He had familiarized himself with the staff and watched as they circulated around the table, serving drinks and taking orders. Earl walked over to ask his partner to contact the man he had on Smithy, and Paul walked away to make the call. While he waited on Paul, Earl made small talk with Paul's wife, Tina. He returned to say that Smithy was still at his apartment and hadn't come out all day. Earl nodded and walked away troubled. This would have been the perfect time for Smithy to make his move, if he was going to make one. He signaled to Kevin and they discussed his worries. Kevin agreed that it was worrisome. Now they felt they didn't know what Smithy intended. Then Emma and Lindora approached him with expressions that made his heart thud in his chest. Smithy was not at home, as was supposed, because he had already struck with his leverage. Emma got to him first and shoved a note at him. The note Lindora held said the same. "Do you know where your son is?" was written in bold black letters. "What is this?" Lindora asked. She looked at Emma and suddenly she understood. Kevin clasped one arm and Paul the other. They escorted her out into one of the front rooms. "What the hell is going on? Kevin, what does this mean?" "Does it mean someone has my son?" she asked in a shaky voice. "Answer the question, Earl. Does someone have our children?" Emma demanded. "Where did you get the note?" Earl asked, stalling for time. "A waiter gave it to me," Lynn and Emma answered. "Kevin, would you explain the situation while I go take a look around?" Earl asked and took off. He didn't even wait for Kevin's answer. Earl couldn't breathe. He felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. That crazy bastard had his son? He went in search of his partner to bring him up to speed. Paul whipped out his phone to his man, who swore that Smithy hadn't left the apartment. Paul asked him to confirm. The answer came back as negative. Smithy wasn't home, and he didn't know how he got past him. Then Earl called the sitter they hired to watch the children. The children were fine. Suddenly, Earl hurried back to the table to find Dora gone. They checked the ladies' room and all the rooms. Dora was nowhere to be found. That's it for now. If you're enjoying the story, come back to find out what happens. Please share, like, and subscribe. Bye for now.